On the sacred Jewish holiday, the terrorist group Hamas unleashed the deadliest day of the Jewish people since the Holocaust. Driven by ancient desire to wipe out the Jewish people off the face of the earth.
Yeah, so that's the level we're on right now. Driven by ancient desire, we're invoking race rhetoric. And it really is race rhetoric, too, because you have to wonder, what does that mean? Hamas is a relatively new political organization, so that's not ancient. Do you mean Muslims? Is the President of the United States saying that Muslims have an ancient desire to eradicate the Jews? Okay. Do you mean, like, people in the Levant, like Palestinians? Do you mean Arabs? Any one of these statements should be disqualifying from the presidency on its own. There's no charitable interpretation of this statement. Like, he is making a race statement, or he is making an Islamophobic one, like a severe one, you know? Driven by ancient desire. That's Canaanite shit. Yeah, it's remember what Amalek did to you? It's fascist rhetoric. Ancient isn't always like ancient history meaning. Yeah, okay, ancient can't possibly refer to like 30 years old or whatever, however old Hamas is. If he, driven by an ancient desire since 1995 to destroy the Jewish people, or whatever year Hamas was founded. Yeah, I really, I don't believe that's the case. I'm confused. Doesn't Biden mean anti-Semitism when he's saying ancient desire, like alluding to Nazis? Isn't that a really weird way of referring to bigotry? Like, if there was discrimination against black people and Biden went up on stage and he said, these white people motivated by ancient desires to... I've never heard that rhetoric used before to refer just to, like, motivated by ancient... I'm sorry, no. There's no getting around the fact that this rhetoric is, like, at the very least, insanely essentialist, to the point where it easily fits more cleanly in the category of, like, being some kind of ethnic, racial, or religious essentialism than it being, like just a way of referring to bigotry, you know? Yeah. Acting on ancient desire. That's insane sounding. That's insane. I've heard Bibi say that, and he is a fascist, so, you know. It at least implies Hamas inherited the desire of the Nazis or something, which is just weird. Yeah, it's weird.
Over 1,200 innocent people, babies, parents, grandparents, slaughtered in their kibbutz, massacred at a music festival, brutally mutilated, and sexually assaulted. Thousands more carrying wounds, bullets and shrapnel from the memory of that terrible day they endured. Hundreds taken hostage, including survivors of the Shoah. Now, here we are, not 75 years later, but just 7.5 months later, and people are already forgetting.
Yeah, man, people are really forgetting about October 7th. That's, nobody talks about it anymore. I've never heard of this.
Already forgetting that Hamas...
Yeah, who? Oh, right, yeah.
...unleashed this terror.
Mm-hmm.
It was Hamas that brutalized Israelis. It was Hamas...
Incredibly tone-deaf. No, he knows exactly what tone he's delivering.
...who took and continues to hold hostages. I have not forgotten, nor have you, and we will not forget.
What is October 7th? Could you explain it? I can't, unfortunately. I just haven't heard enough about it to really talk about it.
Day. And as Jews around the world still cope with the atrocities and trauma of that day and its aftermath, we've seen a ferocious surge of anti-Semitism in America and around the world.
That is true. That's not incorrect, and I don't think it's wrong to bring attention to it.
Vicious propaganda on social media. Jews forced to keep their hide, to keep us under baseball hats, tuck their Jewish stars into their shirts. On college campuses, Jewish students blocked, harassed, attacked.
Total horseshit. Literally total horseshit. Yeah. Invoking the specter of anti-Semitism, a real thing, but then like lying about it and making it the college campus thing again. like genuinely, like fully in line with the far right on this, you know?
While walking to class. Anti-Semitism, anti-Semitic posters, slogans calling for the annihilation of Israel,
That's not anti-Semitic.
the world's only Jewish state. Too many people denying, downplaying, rationalizing, ignoring the horrors of the Holocaust. On October 7th, including Hamas's appalling use of sexual violence to torture and terrorize Jews. It's absolutely despicable, and it must stop.
Yeah, this is, again, it's one of those things where it's like, I'm sure it can be evidence that this has happened, though a lot of the claims that have been made about Hamas's behavior have been found to be dishonest, or at least without evidence. You know, obviously Hamas is bad, but it's like an ongoing genocide is being committed against the Palestinians, and it feels like infinite leeway is given to literally any claim that condemns Hamas because Hamas is bad, and we already know that. So if it's being done in the service of legitimizing an ongoing genocide, you know, you have to be pretty careful with your rhetoric, which he obviously isn't being, because he wants this, you know?
And demonizing any minority is a threat to every minority and the very foundation of our democracy. So in moments like this, we have to put these principles that we're talking about into action. I understand people have strong beliefs and deep convictions about the world. In America, we respect and protect the fundamental right to free speech, to debate and disagree, to protest peacefully, and make our voices heard. I understand that's America. But there is no place on any campus in America, any place in America,
like how the camera's
for
following his hands
anti-Semitism or
moving.
hate speech or threats of violence of any kind.
For that we get the standing ovation. That's great. That's fantastic. Just continuing to construct the myth of like an anti-Semitic mob on every college campus. Just genuinely vile. Yeah.
Whether against Jews or anyone else, violent attacks, destroying property is not peaceful protest. It's against the law.
Oh, wow.
We are not a lawless country. We're a civil society. We uphold the rule of law. And no one...
except for international law, which we break constantly and defend breaking of as long as it's in our interest.
...should have to hide or be brave just to be themselves.
Again, this completely nonsensical fabrication where Jewish students have to hide their kippahs or whatever to avoid getting mauled on the street. Like, just completely fabricated. Like, again, like manufactured consent, a complete fiction. And he knows he's lying. He doesn't think he's not lying. You know, they all know they're lying. This is just the latest and most desperate attempt to oppose the increasing opposition to America's response to the genocide, you know? Like, we try this, we try this, we try that. You know, what if we tried pretending that all these organic student protests where they're holding like Shabbat or have like Jewish students for peace or whatever, let's pretend all of these are like anti-Semitic mobs, you know? Let's do that. Let's see if that angle works. I know that Zionists are delusional, but there's no way they genuinely believe progressive students are all anti-Semitic, right? I think that Biden knows he's lying here. I think most of them know they're lying. There are probably some fanatics who genuinely believe it, but for the most part, I think they're lying. Then again, Biden has been a pretty militant Zionist for his entire career, so he might just be crazy enough to believe it. Not that it makes much of a difference.
This community, I want you to know, I see your fear, your hurt, and your pain. Let me reassure you, as your president, you're not alone. You belong. You always have and you always will. And my commitment to the safety of the Jewish people, the security of Israel, and its right to exist as an independent Jewish state is ironclad, even when we disagree.
Matthew Miller has just denied Hamas accepted the proposal.
No, so a couple things that we have seen over the past 24 hours. So obviously there was
Love
the
C-SPAN.
operation that they launched overnight last night to take control of Rafah Gate. They have described that as a limited operation. It appears to be, at least that piece, a limited operation at this time. They have also, as we...
I hate you so much. We strongly advise Netanyahu to not go into Rafah. You know, that would be a red line for us. Do not go there. We've had tense calls to them, blah, blah. They invade Rafah. They take the crossing, thus blocking aid. And he's like, well, it seems like it's a limited operation, even though we know for a fact by Israel's own description they're going to continue.
We discussed yesterday, ordered the evacuation of some 100,000 people in neighborhoods in Rafah. This military operation that they launched last night was targeted just to Rafah Gate. It wasn't an operation in these civilian areas that they had ordered to be evacuated. We will continue to make clear that we oppose.
Why is this C-SPAN link so bad? Is there another? I guess there wouldn't be another link on this. Why? It sounds so bad.
The major military operation in Rafah.
It's so quiet.
Them privately as well as publicly.
So, but your sense of this is that this is not yet, the Israelis have not yet, at least not yet, overstepped
Not
what you have warned them against doing.
Okay, I like the reporter here is like, okay, so remember when you said that they shouldn't do this?
This appears to be a limited operation, but
Oh my God. What do you mean appears to be? They've said they're going to continue. They're not. What do you? They've literally said like, yeah, first we're taking this, then we're doing all this. And this guy's like, well, they haven't done all that yet. So
of course, much of that depends on what comes next. They have said, I think quite clearly, it's no secret that they want to conduct a major military operation there. We have made clear that we oppose such an operation. And separately, but of course it's related, we are trying to achieve an agreement that would bring an immediate ceasefire and the release of hostages.
And on that, how's that going?
how's that going?
Negotiations are ongoing in Cairo today. We continue to believe that there is space to reach a deal, and we are trying incredibly hard to push one over the line.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you. On Rafah, are the actions that Israel is taking so far reflective of the advice that U.S. officials have been giving regarding targeted, precise strikes in Rafah, or are the Israelis' actions beyond that?
I am not going to get into I'm not going to do
I'm sorry. I'm a representative of the Department of State of the most powerful nation to have ever existed, but I'm not authorized to offer any criticism of this tiny shithole backwater country that exists only because of us. I'm not allowed to, you know.
Two things. Number one, I'm not going to get into the private advice that we have given them. Two, I'm not going to offer an assessment about whether that aligns wholly with the advice that we have given, because to do that, I'd kind of have
because to do that, I would be reminding everyone that they are just doing whatever they want and they don't care about what we say, and it makes us look weak. So I'm not going to get into it.
To lay out what it is that we have told them. But I will say
that would require a spine, and if I talk about it, I will reveal that we have none.
That this does appear to be a limited operation so far, but as I made clear, it does to a great extent depend on what comes next and what we've seen so far.
This is like saying, listen, man, you can't shoot that baby. And then the guy pulls out a gun and loads one bullet and cocks the gun. And somebody's like, yo, you gonna stop him? He's loading the gun. He's gonna shoot the baby. And you're like, well, no, he hasn't shot the baby. He's loaded the gun. Seems to be a limited operation. There's no evidence to indicate that he'll... Now, I disagree with going further and shooting the baby, but up until this point, so far, things seem fine. You know, that's literally what's being said right now.
So far is the ordering, is not just this limited operation, but the ordering of the evacuation of 100,000 people. And we have made clear that we don't think the kind of military operation that would follow such an evacuation is one that we can support because of the dramatic impact it would have on the civilian population there and the ability to get humanitarian assistance in and deliver to those people.
You and other American officials have reminded us consistently that the U.S. has been clear about what it thinks about a major Rafah offensive. Have you been coordinating with allies and partners on the potential consequences should Israel launch such an offensive?
So I'm not going to speak to that. We have, largely because I'm not going to speak to what decisions that we may make if Israel does launch such an operation. We have made clear that they have to make their decisions about policy, and we will make our decisions about our policy.
That's so... I love it. I love being a citizen of the most powerful country in the history of the world, man. That's great. That's phenomenal. You know? Just, man, well, you know, we've said stuff, but they say stuff. You know, we have preferences, but they have preferences. That's great, man. That's phenomenal. We are capable of being so bold and powerful when we want to be, you know?
Policy. Obviously, we discussed that with our allies and partners around the world. We discussed Secretary.
I genuinely wonder if it would have been better for the Biden administration if they had gone like completely mask off with no pretense of giving a shit about what Israel does, and if they had just adopted the Republican line of cheering on the death of Palestinians, you know? I genuinely wonder if it would have been much worse than what we're doing right now. Like, seriously, in a way, it's almost more pathetic to watch the Biden administration pretend to offer any kind of resistance, and then nothing changes. You know, at least if the Biden administration was just supporting everything that was happening, we wouldn't be reminded constantly of how little they're willing to do.
Every time he meets with one of our allies, one of the first things on the table, oftentimes even before whatever bilateral issue we have to discuss, they want to talk about what is going on in the Middle East and what is going on with respect to the war in Gaza. So we do talk about this sometimes in quite detail, in quite a bit of detail, but I'm not going to talk about. I'm not going to read that out publicly.
Okay, I have two more on the region. One is on the hostage talks. There's been some reporting that the U.S. may be making promises about the length and the permanence of the cessation of hostilities, promises that Israel may not be willing to keep. So can you clarify whether the U.S. and Israel are actually aligned on that front, or whether the U.S.
He's not going to answer because doing so would be a reminder of our spinelessness and the fact that Israel just does what it wants.
is making some unilateral promises?
So I'm not going to talk about the details of these negotiations.
Yep.
And I
Yeah.
hope
God, man.
Understand why. It's something we have tried to do since the beginning, is not to talk in too much detail about these negotiations because of how sensitive they are, and they maybe have never been more sensitive than they are at this moment, where we think a deal is possible, and we are trying to push one over the line. I will say that we have closely coordinated with the government of Israel on this matter. We have been in touch with them on a daily, oftentimes an hourly basis, and will continue to do so.
Okay, one more. Without getting into what the conclusion is, tomorrow is the deadline for the National Security Memorandum that this building needs to deliver to Congress. Again, I don't expect you to tell us what, if any, conclusion has been made, but has a conclusion been made as to whether Israel has violated U.S. or international law?
Not going to answer this because
Not going to answer that question directly because the report
Collar
is not
gap.
finished. We are working incredibly hard to get that report finished, get that report finalized, and get it.
This is the report where 4 of the bureaus within the State Department have broken rank and written extensively on the complete lack of credibility Israel has with any of the claims it's made, to the point that they have used the weapons we've given them responsibly and with consideration for human rights. It's that report.
To delivered to Congress as soon as possible.
Do you expect it to be delivered tomorrow?
We are trying very hard to meet that deadline. It is, I will
that's-
just note, a self-imposed deadline. It's not one that is in statute, but we are trying very hard to get the report done. It is a complicated report. This is the first time the department has ever written something like this. First time we've ever gone through and made these kind of assessments about the 2 questions that are at issue in the report. So
I wonder if it's indicative that this is the first time the State Department has ever had to like answer the question of whether or not we're just like funding a genocide directly. And like, I don't know. It just seems like the fact that this is even being discussed is pretty wild.
there is a lot of work that has to be done. That work is ongoing. We know we're up against the deadline. We're trying to get it. We're trying to meet it. It's possible it slips just a little bit, but we are still at this point trying to get it done by tomorrow.
Sorry, this is the first time you guys have ever written a report about whether your military sales to a foreign country are being used in violation or not in violation?
It is the first time we have had to write this kind of report that's called for in the NSM. Yeah, there may be other ones, but let me just
excessive.
Notice how he tried to cut off the guy. Like, okay, man, this is so indicative. Look at how he tried to cut that guy off early, because saying what the report is about makes it sound really bad. Like, he didn't even let the guy finish talking. He was just like, no, don't say this type of report. Just, this like bureaucrat. Let's refer to this report as a kind of like, bureaucratic category and not like as a descriptor of what it's looking into.
A report about whether
by tomorrow.
Look at his face. Look at his face.
This is the first time you guys have ever written a report about whether your military sales to a foreign country are being used in violation or not in violation.
It is the first time we have had to write this kind of report that's called for in the NSM. There may be other ones, but let me just
excessive your predecessor and in previous administrations have always talked about how you're always looking into whether or not the weapons that you provide to countries are used in compliance with it. And this is now all of a sudden it's the first time?
Those are different questions, Matt. We are always looking into how things are used, but those are ongoing assessments. And right now, these are ongoing assessments. And that's what makes the process a little difficult. We have ongoing assessments that are being made. And
it doesn't help that this guy looks like a weasel, too. Like, he looks like typecasted as the government guy who doesn't give you answers, you know?
Middle of that process, we are... because we decided it was a good idea to do on our own volition, stopping in the middle of that and making assessments about or answering questions about Israel's compliance with international humanitarian law, as well as the delivery of humanitarian assistance. And I should add, it's not just Israel. Always make this point. There are other countries as well that this applies to. It is the first time state has ever written a report of this nature, especially in the middle of a conflict, that goes to Congress, and so we want to make sure we have it right.
All right, and then just one other...
So, in other words, yes, this is unique and special.
The thing that I was confused on is that you seem to be bothered by the idea that the Israelis have told 100,000 people to evacuate from part of Rafah. And yet, it was my understanding that over the course of the last month or so, you guys have been telling the Israelis that you would oppose a major operation there unless they had a plan to get civilians out. Are you suggesting that they're telling 100,000 people to get out of the way is a bad thing?
No.
If they're going to do an operation?
It is not.
I mean, it seems to me that is a plan, whether or not it is worthy or not, but it is a plan.
It is not.
Who is this guy? This guy is not masking his contempt, like, even a little bit. This reporter. It is so obvious in the way that he's talking. Like, his voice is dripping with it. Yeah.
In theory, it is not in theory a bad thing to do. Of course, if you're going to conduct a military operation, you want...
It's Matt Lee? That's Matt Lee? Okay, I don't have the brain that allows me to, like, remember all the White House press correspondence. Well, I guess this is the State Department press correspondence, but still. This guy, American journalist and diplomatic writer, has been working for the Associated Press since 2007. Nice. He's got some killer pipes.
I want to see people evacuated, but those people need to have somewhere to go. And the place that they go to needs to have sufficient food, sufficient water, sufficient housing, sufficient sanitation. And we have not yet seen a plan that would deliver that. And I
met him once, very nice IRL. Most journalists seem to be honest. You know what? The impression that I've gotten, for the most part, is that, like, older journalists, and by journalists I don't mean like column writers or like news pundits or whatever else. I mean journalists are like a rare gem, and they're like a dying creed. Or sorry, they have like a dying creed, basically. Like, real journalism is kind of dying now, so people who got into it before it did, like Walter Cronkite shit, just anything, I'm sure it's not entirely gone, and there are young people who keep it up. It's just, I don't know. There's so much integrity. The profession of a journalist used to be so much, it used to be imbued with so much, like, weight and gravitas and, like, respect. And a lot of that's just kind of gone now, for the most part. So it's pretty unfortunate. I consider Aaron Reed as a modern take on good journalism. Yeah, for sure, 100%. But that's, like, a different kind of journalist. That's more of, like, information synthesis and delivery. There's something about, pardon me for kind of, like, I don't know, romanticizing an older aesthetic of journalism, but the idea of just being like an old dude in an ill-fitting suit who will follow around politicians and ask them hard-hitting questions in, like, a low accusatory tone of voice. I don't know. It's yeah. I wonder if this guy's legacy is one of the reasons why he's allowed to rep for the State Department question taking for AP. Yeah, investigative journalists, I think.
There's also the question that if you evacuate 100,000 people and launch military operations, will it be only 100,000 people that move, or will it be more? Other people that see the conflict and flee in the face of it. Our assessment is it's probably a lot more than 100,000 that would move, and so you have to have plans not just for 100,000 people, but hundreds and hundreds of thousands of additional people to take care of their needs, and that's not what we have seen. Okay. So, Simon, go ahead.
I'm wondering, you've been warning, obviously, for that this operation shouldn't go ahead without that plan. you seem to be holding back from saying that it has gone ahead, but in terms of what you've been warning about, the humanitarian impact, it seems there is already an impact in terms of, another boarding crossing is closed, and at the moment we understand both border crossings are closed. So do Israel's actions over the last 24 hours set back the work that you've been pushing them to do on the humanitarian
Which he can't answer because answering this would implicate Israel.
situation, given that there's a near famine conditions in Gaza?
Certainly, the closing of Kerem Shalom and the closing of Rafah set back the delivery of humanitarian assistance. Now, to some extent, the full answer to that question depends on what happens next and whether they're quickly reopened. And Israel has committed to reopen Kerem Shalom tomorrow. We're working to make sure that that actually happens, so humanitarian assistance can continue to come through. And I should add that Kerem Shalom didn't close just because of an...
Except the IDF has been choking out delivery of aid at all the crossings they control, either because of paid up civilian protesters, or because they're inspecting every box to make sure that they don't have anything, I don't know, flammable or whatever. Oh, potatoes? Well, potatoes are a kind of biofuel that you could use to power a generator, that could be used to recharge the phone, that could be used to signal for Islamic Jihad to fire a rocket at a kibbutz,
action by Israel. It closed because it was bombed by Hamas. So we want to see it reopen as soon as possible. They've said they'll do it tomorrow. Same thing with Rafah. They didn't close just because of an action by Israel. It closed because it was bombed by working to make sure that that actually happens, so humanitarian assistance can continue to come through. And I should add that Kerem Shalom didn't close just because of an action by Israel. It closed because it was bombed by Hamas. So we want to see it reopen as soon as possible. They've said they'll do it tomorrow. Same thing with Rafah. They said that Rafah will reopen for the delivery of fuel, which is incredibly important to desalinization of water. It's incredibly important to fueling the trucks that deliver humanitarian assistance once it's inside Gaza, and it's incredibly important.
Can you explain to me how Hamas firing rockets at IDF forces nearby means you get to close an entire delivery point for aid? How nearby? Do you mean 100 feet away, 1,000? Do you mean something vaguely in the area? Oh, sorry, a bottle rocket blew up, a mile away. We now have to cut off aid to 2 million people. Sorry. Oops. Oopsie doopsie. Blame Hamas. Definitely not us, just using any imaginable excuse to cut it off. Super cool. I'm trying to see if any of these news sites that cover it say where exactly. I'm just seeing the same copy-pasted shit over and over again. By nearby, I can't see anything. Nah, I can't find any information on where the actual strikes were.
For running bakeries that deliver bread for the population there that needs it so much. But we want to see it fully reopen. And so when I say it depends on what happens next, if Kerem Shalom opens and Rafah reopens, those will be important steps, because we don't want to see humanitarian assistance limited or impeded in any way.
So if they told you that now they've got control of Rafah, this is actually going to be better in terms of getting humanitarian aid? Is that what you sort of seem to be suggesting?
No, that's not what I'm suggesting. I don't want to get into any private conversations. They've said it would reopen for fuel. We want to see it reopen for everything, because it is... Rafah is a crossing that should note that the amount of humanitarian assistance that has gone in through Rafah has gone down over time as assistance has shifted more to Kerem Shalom. But that assistance...
What's this creepy little smirk? Because it's a game to him. Because he knows the truth. He's a State Department official. He knows what he can and can't say. So when a reporter asks him a tough question, it's like it's like being given a difficult prompt in Pictionary, it's just let me, you get, and it's a shared game too, to an extent, because this guy knows that the reporters know that he can't say certain stuff. So the reporter's job is to ask questions that are reasonable, but also probe at information he doesn't want to give, that they know that he can't give because he's on orders. It's not like he has much autonomy here. So he does these little smirks and chuckles because it's like, haha, am I going to navigate my way around this one? That's the game.
Is still critical. We're not in a position where we can afford to see any delivery mechanism shut down, even if it's one of the relatively small ones. And I only say relatively small in relation to the amount coming in through Kerem Shalom. But we also want to see it open for fuel. It is the entry point for humanitarian workers that come in. It is the exit point for people that come out. of Rafah. So it's important that gate be open, not just for the delivery of humanitarian assistance, but so that humanitarian workers can come in and out of Gaza to do the important work that they do every day.
And just finally, we've already seen, I think there's some videos of, tanks rolling over civilian infrastructure as they've entered into the area around the border crossing. There are reports of, civilian loss of life. There's been airstrikes in Rafah. I guess just to try and get clarity on, does the US oppose what Israel has done so far, or you're just saying...
What? Well, what? All right, guys. What do you think he's going to answer with? Will he waffle out, or will he directly condemn Israel for engaging in obvious, completely unjustified attacks on civilian infrastructure, particularly the signage, which they recorded them rolling over with tanks?
We'll have to wait and see.
So we clearly oppose the destruction of any civilian infrastructure if it does not constitute a legitimate military target. Now, when you get to looking at any one video, we'd have to be able to assess whether that's a legitimate military target.
Yeah, okay, so, yeah, we disavow all violence against civilian targets. Now, has that happened? We can't say, We'd have to review any, maybe that sign was full of Hamas, possibly.
Are there Hamas fighters in there? The issues that we have gone through a number of times. But certainly we don't want to see civilian infrastructure damaged, destroyed in any way. But that said, to the larger question, it is not our assessment that a major military operation has begun at this point, but that could obviously change at any moment, and we will continue to make clear that it's not one that we could support.
Just one video.
Again, like this is just a straightforward lie. The operation in Rafah has begun. Netanyahu's cabinet voted unanimously on doing an operation in Rafah. Just taking the crossing was the first step of the operation. It's like a guy with a gun and there's 1,000 babies and he starts shooting them and you're like, whoa, didn't you say he shouldn't shoot 1,000 babies? Like, well, he hasn't shot 1,000 yet. He shot 18.
Question has an Israeli tank rolling over an "I love Gaza" sign. Does that seem like something that could be a legitimate military target?
That does not seem like it would serve any legitimate military purpose. No.
Well, do you consider...
Hold on. Far be it for me to not mark this with some attention. Vaush, I've been trying to reach you, okay? I'm a Chatterbait streamer with 300,000 followers, and J.K. Rowling got my friend and I banned off Twitter. From Big Dick Tranny Nicole. Well, I'm very sorry to hear that, Nicole. I don't know what I can do about that, but I'm very sorry to hear that, and we're currently covering the State Department's press briefing following Israel's operation in Rafah in southern Gaza. But I am rooting for you.
Gaza sign to be critical infrastructure?
No, so I've seen the video, but I don't know what...
Wait, I'm sorry.
Sign. Does that, an Israeli tank rolling over an "I love Gaza" sign, does that seem like something that could be a legitimate military target?
That does not seem like it would serve any legitimate military purpose, no.
Well,
that's okay. Good to know there is a line eventually where at some point even this guy has to be like, okay, that did. I like how he pretended to not know what they were talking about at first. Yeah, at first with the vague like civilian infrastructure bit, he was like, well, I don't know, I haven't seen. But then listen, because he's about to say it.
Do you consider an "I love Gaza" sign to be critical infrastructure?
No, so I've seen the video, but...
He's seen the video. He knew exactly what they were talking about. Only by specifically invoking the video and its contents did they get something approximating a condemnation from him. But before that, he was all, well, we don't know what civilian infrastructure. I mean, if I saw evidence of civilian infrastructure... Yeah, of course, because you have to fucking getting blood from a stone,
I don't know where the tank was going, but just on the face of it, no, that would not seem to be so. Go ahead.
Well, get ready, by the way. Netanyahu is going to call this guy anti-Semitic for saying that.
NSM, is that taking into account anything that's happening in Rafah over these past few days?
So it is a looking backwards report. I'm not going to get into it. You'll have to wait and see when we make it public.
Yes or no, though? Can you say if that's part
Again,
of why you might not meet the
when it
deadline?
comes to any of the content of the report, I think you're just going to have to wait and see. It's something that we're still working on.
And the Jordanians say that another one of their aid convoys was attacked by Israeli extremists on the way to Erez. Do you have any comment on this? Has there been any discussion with the Israeli government since this latest incident, which is, I think, the second one?
It is something that we have raised with the Israeli government. We have made it clear to them that they need to take action to prevent these attacks, and they need to take action to hold people accountable. This is something that happened for the first time with this particular route. Last week when we were in Israel, and the secretary raised it directly with Prime Minister Netanyahu, and in that case they made 3 arrests of people responsible. That is obviously the appropriate thing to do. They need to make arrests in this case, hold people accountable, and send a strong public message as a deterrent that they will not tolerate these attacks on convoys that are just trying to deliver humanitarian assistance to innocent civilians that need it.
There's also, our team has reported that 9 children have been killed in Rafah since the start of the Israeli limited operation, as you described it. Do you have any comment on this?
Obviously, every death of any civilian, but especially children, is a tragedy, whether they're in Rafah or anywhere else inside Gaza.
Thank you guys. Oh my god, I want to expose the turfs that sent us death threats, so I'm like trying to reach out to people to critique her, but Vaush baby, reach out to me on InstaBaby, Batty Nicole Mancini. See folks, it's that easy, huh? Thank you, Big Dick Tranny Nicole. I wish you luck in your ongoing crusade to find people to help with this. From what I can tell, that the attack that Israel closed the crossing over was targeting the military base 2 kilometers away. That's the feeling that I get, because they wouldn't put a military base literally on the crossing, I imagine. They just wanted an excuse to close it, you know? What is this? Video being passed around on Telegram of an Israeli boy allegedly being arrested for trying to block humanitarian aid trucks at the Gaza Strip. Arrested by who? Are you telling me that the IDF or Israeli military are arresting this tiny Jewish boy for... I think this video is fake.
And we've made that clear since the outset of this operation. Yeah, go ahead.
Just to clarify,
I heard you sort of jumping in back there several times. I always get to you, Saeed.
I know you will. I'm just, getting some exercise. So
I think we can all do better than that.
Yeah,
Counting
exactly.
what we do in here is exercise.
Yeah, that's about the extent of it. Anyway, the NSM-20. Now it's been 3 months. How do you think? How long it will be before it is released? Do you have any expectations, like next week or the week after?
So we are working incredibly hard to get it done. We want to get it done tomorrow. It's possible it slips just a very short period of time. But as I said, our goal is still to try to get it done tomorrow.
So,
if we don't, I'll have an update for you, but we want to get it done as soon as possible.
So it could come out tomorrow.
Absolutely.
Okay. Now a couple of things on the, on Rafah. You said that your understanding is that this is a very limited operation. So the Israelis can conceivably do a number of limited operations. In other words, collectively it will be a big operation, but they can.
This is the State Department of the United States, and we're operating like the IQ level we're operating on now is a reporter going like, okay, so if they do a lot of small operations, what if it added up to one big one? And like this is something we actually have to.
Strike this area of Rafah and that area of Rafah and so on. Would that always be? Would that also be okay with you?
So I'm not going to speculate about some hypothetical scenario that may happen in the future, but obviously there is a point where a series of limited operations are one large one. That's just as a theoretical.
This is the level we're on.
True, but in terms of what might happen, I'm just not going to speculate on that or comment on such a hypothetical.
On the crossing, I mean, isn't it? You said that the crossing of Karm Abu Salim or Karm Shalom was closed because of the strike. But in fact, what was struck was a military base or a military encampment for the Israelis, and not really the crossing itself. I'm just saying logistically.
So, I mean, you could make that argument. It was that strike at Kerem Shalom that precipitated its closure. And I would say, yes, it appears that the strike was aimed at IDF forces there. Could have hit the humanitarian workers. Could have hit everyone coming through.
Could it have? A strike targeted IDF facility, and it's, well, that could have hit anyone, so
It's that strike that precipitated its closure. But that said, you should be very clear about what our position is. We want to see it open. We want to see it open as soon as possible. They've said that they'll open it tomorrow. We'll see. We're going to work to see that happens.
Isn't it a bit cynical of the Israelis?
I like how he turned "will see" to "we're going to work to see that happens," because "will see" would correctly imply that we have no control over them and they do whatever they want. So instead it had to be like this, yeah, we'll work to see. Yeah, America and Israel together will work to make sure that the crossing is open. Yeah, for sure.
You know, to do this on the day after Cindy McCain came out and said there's a full-blown famine in Gaza. They closed, Rafah, they closed Karm of Salim, they closed all these things. Doesn't that bother you that, right after the head of the World Food Program comes out and says there's a full-blown famine in Gaza? They went and closed it.
So I don't think you have to draw a connection between those comments and the closing of those two gates. It doesn't matter. We want to see the gates open because we know the humanitarian the humanitarian situation is dire in Gaza. We know that people need food and need water and need medical supplies, and that's why we want to see those crossings open. It's also why we work to get Erez crossing open. It's why we're working on a maritime option. It's why we have continued to work hard from the president on down to get humanitarian assistance delivered into Gaza.
Mm-hmm. One last question on the settlements. The Israeli settlers seem to use, they shepherd their sheep and so on, to using their guns and so on to basically take over, to seize West Bank land. Are you aware of this report?
I don't know. Well, I'm not aware of this specific report, but obviously that has been something that has been well reported and well documented over the past several months, as well as preceding that time.
Thank you.
And I should have thought there's going to be a follow-up question. Since not, I'll just go ahead. We have made clear that the Israeli government needs to do more to crack down on settler violence. They need to do more to police settler violence. They need to do more to hold extremist settlers accountable for their violent actions. And we have also made clear, and you've seen us roll out sanctions to this effect, that when we don't see sufficient action, we're ready and willing to take action ourselves, and we will continue to do so.
Thank you.
Yeah.
By sanctioning extremely specific people and groups rather than the entire country. Yeah.
Thank you. The UN Secretary General, Mr. Antonio Guterres, said that the closing of Rafah crossing is adversely going to affect the humanitarian aid that's getting into Gaza to a situation that's already catastrophic. Do you believe that's a violation of international law?
So to answer that question, you have to look at all the other deliveries of humanitarian assistance. I can't offer you a legal definition from here because you have to weigh it against
Are these people missing the gene that lets them feel embarrassed, like he knows he looks like an idiot, right? I think that if you've been doing this job, or if you've been in this field for long enough, you start to see the world in a different way. You get this increasingly cynical view of realpolitik where you think okay, obviously, as the State Department, you can't tell everyone the truth all the time. Nobody does. That'd be insane. No country could exist if every state secret, every belief of every politician, every intention of a leader was just leaked to the public immediately. That's not doable. And that's correct. That's not doable. So, what can we conceal and what can't we conceal? And I think that logic runs down a long road that eventually leads to you sort of internally, you sort of construct a moral system where it is good actually to do stuff like this, because it speaks to there's a broader cause to stability there, because to be more disruptive or more honest would compromise the sort of integrity of the hegemony. And this is, I think, if anything, this is actually a great reaffirmation of the anarchist attitude towards entryism, the idea that you can reform a system from within. Well, the anarchist argument is often by becoming a part of the system, even with good intentions, you will be molded by it. The system has the ability to change you just as you have the ability to change it. And for that reason, I don't think this guy's a weasel, and the government right now is acting particularly dishonestly about what's going on in Palestine. But I think there's also a broader argument to be made about the idea that the systems that existed would always create a situation where you had this guy being a Weasley like this, the problem isn't just well, this administration is bad. It's not even a systemic, well, what if we had socialism instead kind of thing. It's the nation state, right? The nation state has to protect its interests and its secrets, and for that reason, it will create state departments that say stuff like this. I don't think it's a complete defeater to entryism. I just think it's a gigantic, throbbing asterisk.
Other factors, including whether sufficient humanitarian assistance is coming in through other crossings. If that's, you could theoretically come up with a situation where all the aid that's going in through one crossing diverts to another. That said, that's not a situation that we want to see, because there is not enough humanitarian assistance going in right now. We have seen it increase over the past 4 or 5 weeks since the president had that phone call on April 4th with Prime Minister Netanyahu. But we are not yet at the point where we can afford to shut down Rafah or any other one crossing. We need to see humanitarian assistance come in. And so that's why we'll work to continue to see it reopen. Now, that said, one of the things that Israel said is very much accurate, which is Hamas did control the Gaza side of Rafah crossing, and Hamas was continuing to collect revenue from that crossing being open. So it is a legitimate goal to try and derive Hamas from...
Just another reminder, by the way, of how crazy it is that we've seen basically no evidence of the IDF fighting Hamas. Like, they have, don't get me wrong. You can find it. It exists. I don't think Hamas is like a deep state lie. But, man, you know, you see footage of the tanks storming across the Rafah crossing, and what is it? Like, they just run over a sign. You know, Hamas just always seems to be so present wherever we're not looking or pointing the cameras at. Really makes you wonder if the fascist ethno-nationalist regime committing a genocide might be slightly overstating the presence of the threat, considering the fact that the IDF has lost... I'm sorry, how many people? Seriously, how many people has the IDF lost? Haven't they lost fewer people in the entirety of the genocide than they did during October 7th alone? Didn't they lose, like, 400 people during October 7th, and since then they've lost 200 or so people in 7 months? Really makes you wonder how present and how much of a threat Hamas actually is, you know. And some of that was friendly fire. Yeah, true. I wonder how much of it. We'll probably never know for sure, but a lot of it, I imagine.
Revenue, money that they could use to continue to finance their terrorist activities. That said, we want...
They're the government of the Gaza Strip. That's not surprising.
to see the crossing open, and we're going to work to try to get it back open.
Okay, so you're justifying basically that the Israelis closing it because they have many reasons.
It's not.
Like,
it's not what I said.
It is what you said. It is what you said. Yeah, because you were like, well, yeah, Hamas was collecting money on that side of the crossing, and they were using it to fund their terrorist efforts. So that is justifying the taking of the Rafah crossing. That is fully a justification.
Not at all. It's not at all.
No. Please don't mistake my justifications of the closing of the Rafah crossing as justifications of closing of the Rafah crossing.
That's why I said no. You could find another. You could find another way to open that crossing, hopefully, without Hamas being the one that is manning the Gaza side of it.
Not without storming it. How else would what?
And collecting revenue as goods flow through Rafah, collecting revenue. Some of it licit, some of it probably illicit. When you think of bribes and other things that happen with the crossing of traffic through that crossing. So I would say, yes, it is a legitimate goal to try to deprive Hamas of that revenue, but we need to find a way of doing that that keeps Rafah open.
What? You want to remove Hamas from Rafah, but in a way that keeps it open, but the only way to remove Hamas from Rafah would have been to storm it, which would close the crossing. You can't keep the crossing open when it's an active battle zone. Completely incoherent.
There's just expressed concern about this 100,000 civilians who are being evacuated. And you said there is no place for them to go. And our reporting from Gaza basically that there is no safe place for people to go. And as you know, many people have been walking 10 kilometers to go somewhere else. Isn't this already defying what you've been calling the Israelis not to do, whether evacuating 1.5 million or 100,000? The evacuation has to be with a viable plan, as you said, but there is no viable plan. So the Israelis already define you. Any consequences for that?
Well, I don't know, guys. Do you think he's going to have a response for that?
We have made clear we don't want to see a major military operation. This does look like the prelude of a major military operation.
Does it now? Oh, did the reporter connected the dots for you? What if a bunch of minor operations made a major operation? Oh, and now it's clicked, and now he can't do that bit anymore.
We have not yet seen that operation commence, and in terms of any policy response, we'll wait to see what happens next before we make those determinations.
Okay.
Great. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
One final question. don't know if I got a satisfactory answer, but anyway, one final question about these mass graves. Almost 400 people have been buried in mass graves. Some of them, according to the latest UN report, not eyewitnesses on the ground, the UN report or Palestinian media, that they've been buried alive. And some were children, some were women.
And they had hands bound behind their back, yeah, or their wrists bound in some cases, right? Yeah, literally just like standard, like Soviet style, like shot in the back of the head, dumped in the hole style mass graves.
I know you've been saying that you're a bit slow in writing reports and delivering them on time, but why we've been calling about this investigation? What's holding this investigation? Because, there's serious concern here about 400 people have been rounded and buried, and some have been buried alive.
So we have made clear that
What do you think we've made clear?
Israel needs to continue to be transparent about this issue. Israel has said that with respect to this issue of mass graves, there are places where they were operated where there were mass graves where Palestinians have buried their dead all together, probably because of the extraordinary circumstances in which they have been forced to live. And
very officer-involved shooting there. The extraordinary circumstances in which they have been forced to live. Thanks. But no, a lot of those corpses had their hands bound and they were shot at close range. They weren't just like... So we're listening now to Israel, whose response to the mass civilian graves accusation is actually the Palestinians did it themselves. Thank you. Fantastic.
Israel has come in and exhumed some bodies to try to identify whether there were hostages here. They've gotten intelligence that there were hostages contained in those mass graves, and so they've exhumed them to check that and then rebury them after the fact. We believe they ought to continue to be transparent about what exactly took place, and that'll continue to be our position.
So no answers at all. Okay.
Go ahead.
Matt, could I clarify just one thing?
Sure.
Haaretz just reported.
Here's the UN's article on it. Mass graves in Gaza shows victims' hands were tied, says UN Rights Office. Yeah, I'm sure the Palestinians just naturally buried those people due to the extraordinary circumstances in which they have been forced to live. Total of 283 bodies. Others were found tied with their hands tied, stripped of their clothes. But remember, the United Nations is Hamas, so this doesn't mean anything.
That the crossing at Rafah would be managed by an American company. Are you aware of this kind of suggestion?
I'm not aware of that at all.
Okay, thank you.
That was my question.
Sorry about
This
that.
2 days in a row. I came to you and somebody else had asked a
I
question.
came to sit next to him and see him at film.
Right. Yeah, Michelle, go ahead.
That the administration is holding up munition shipments to send a political message to Israel. Is that true, and what is the message?
Look, our support for Israel's right to defend itself, our support for Israel's right to ensure that October 7th never happens again remains strong, and with respect...
It will happen again, actually. In like 5 months exactly.
To any individual shipments, I'm just not going to speak to them from here.
And second, did the U.S. give any guarantees to Hamas on ending the war in Gaza?
So I'm not going to speak to what are very sensitive, delicate, ongoing negotiations, and you should not read into my kind of blanket refusal to do that anything as regards to your question. It's just a rule that, given the nature of the negotiations right now, I don't think it would be helpful. I don't think it would be productive to get into it. There have been obviously a lot of reports over what has been in various proposals over the past 24 hours. Some of those reports have been more accurate than others. Some of them have been completely off base. I don't think it serves our purpose, given the status of negotiations, to kind of parse
and
through
what
those
about
here and
this
talk about
report
them.
concerning the guarantees? Is it accurate?
I think I just answered the question. I don't have anything further to add.
You gonna actually do anything about it? Whoa, hold on. Come on, fuck off.
So your position is that you don't comment about individual shipments?
I'm not in this case, no.
Because you do in pretty much every other case. In fact, I've looked back over the last 3 weeks. I got one to Argentina, one to Iraq, one to the Netherlands, one to Poland, one to Saudi Arabia. You don't have any problem talking about those.
It always depends on the situation, but we have made clear in this.
That guy's... Ooh. Oh, my God. He brought the list.
It often does. There are times that we have congressionally mandated rules about things we need to disclose. There are times that we disclose arms shipments because we want to rally we want to rally our allies and partners to do the same. And there are times that we keep those shipments private. It's also true, as you know this more than me, that there are a variety of different arms sales programs. There are different disclosure mechanisms for each of those.
I'm well aware, and I know where you're coming from on this. I just think that it doesn't make any sense because you guys, basically, you just have to come out and say that you are not consistent about this, and that when it suits you to announce an arms sale or an arms shipment, you'll do it, and when you don't think that it suits you, then you don't, and that's inconsistency at its.
This guy's not getting invited back next. State Department's going to go to the Associated Press and be like, "Hey, listen, okay, you need to find someone a little bit younger and a little more agreeable over here."
What is the definition of being inconsistent?
There are different situations all around the world, and of course, we look at them differently. Go ahead, Alex. Thank you.
There are different situations all around the world. Of course, we look at them differently. Basically, just admitting, that it is inconsistency.
Are you?
I want to stay.
Yeah, if you stay in the region, I'll come to you. Go ahead.
Just one quick one. Is there any update on whether the U.S. has come to a new determination on possible Leahy law violations?
No,
in the case of that one IDF unit?
Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt. No, we continue to look through and review new information that Israel has provided to us, and are working on what that assessment will be.
And you have no expectation for how long that process could take?
I don't. We're trying to get it finished as soon as possible, but it's important that we get it right as well.
I want to stay in the region, but farther east, on Syria, the U.S. repatriated several dozen, I think around 22 dozen Westerners from the camps in Al-Hol. There were apparently 11 Americans that were repatriated. Can you give us any details on how that operation played out? And could you tell us if you have that number or ballpark number of how many Americans we're talking about left in these camps?
So in terms of the operation that just happened overnight, there were 11 Americans and then one family member who is not a U.S. citizen, but a family member of a U.S. citizen, part of this 11 who were repatriated and brought to the United States. It's something that we've been working on with our international partners as well as humanitarian partners, because we believe that repatriation is the only durable, long-term solution to the humanitarian and security situation in northeast Syria. And just as we have done in this
Vaush, you drink enough water today?
all
No.
countries of origin to repatriate, rehabilitate, reintegrate, and where appropriate, prosecute their nationals upon return from Syria. And then with respect to the number of Americans that remain, we're aware of approximately 25 U.S.
Hydration check.
May be located in displaced persons camps and detention facilities in northeast Syria. Around
Fucking
25.
spilled water on my shorts.
Beyond the 11 that came
Yes,
back.
beyond.
Yeah. Okay.
May I follow up on that?
Sure,
Just
go
to
ahead.
follow. So this was not a product of direct talks with Syrians, right?
No,
If
it
that's the
was
case, did you learn anything about the case of Austin
My
during
Jace.
this process?
So with respect to Austin Tice, we continue to call on the Syrian regime to ensure Austin Tice and every U.S. national held in Syria are able to return home. We continue to work every available path to ensure his return home. We've engaged extensively with regard to this case, trying to bring him home, and we're not going to give up until we do.
You might want to take this one from me. As you know, Austin's mother was in town last week. She gave an interview and she said that she's seeking an access to State Department report from 2020 fall about the trip of Trump administration official to Syria. The report was not shared with the family, which contains significant details about how the Syrians are trying to provide proof of life. Are you willing to come up with a report?
So I can't speak to that specific report. We have obviously been engaged with Austin Tice's family, including his mother. I will just say
I'm going to skip ahead a little bit.
As a parent, I think it's about a U.S. citizen who is revenue from Rafah Gate, but at the same time, we don't want to see Rafah Gate shut, so we want to see it reopen. So I'm not going to comment. I'm not going to pass judgment one way or the other, whether it's constructive or not. What is important from our perspective is that we not see a major military operation go forward. Like I said,
approach constructive.
So I mean, I spoke to this earlier in the process, which is we don't want to see a major military operation. They have said this is a limited operation. There are some legitimate purposes, like I said, in keeping Hamas from depriving revenue from Rafah Gate, but at the same time, we don't want to see Rafah Gate shut, so we want to see it reopened.
To do the operation.
So I'm not going to comment. I'm not going to pass judgment.
Why would they need to evacuate 100,000 people if they weren't going to continue the operation? How does that make any sense? How could you possibly believe that they intended to seize the Rafah crossing and evacuate 100,000 people after unanimously voting to do the Rafah operation, which Netanyahu has been saying he's going to be doing for months now, and then pretend that's like it's stopping here?
One way or the other, whether it's constructive or not, what is important from our perspective is that we not see a major military operation go forward, and we've made that, I think, pretty clear.
Go ahead. Clarify, it sounds like this is the case. The Secretary last week multiple times referenced this generous and flexible offer that Israel had put forward, and you're saying this is not what he was referring to, what that Hamas put forward or accepted yesterday?
There was an offer. He was referring to the offer that was put forward some 10, 11 days ago, April 26th, I believe it was. That's the offer that was on the table. Hamas seemed to make clear that they, in their public statements, that they accepted that offer yesterday. That is not what they did. They responded with amendments, call it a counterproposal if you want, and we're working through the details of that now.
And can you give us any updates on the military pier that's being constructed in Gaza? Do you expect that the Rafah operation is going to delay its construction or operation?
So I would really refer you to the Pentagon for details on that. Just because they're the ones that are actually doing the construction and doing the operation, they'll have the latest
That might be correct, actually, on his part.
Details on it. I would certainly hope that a Rafah operation would not delay it. It's in a different part of Gaza from where they would be operating. If anything, it just shows why it's so important to get that.
So they're saying Hamas didn't agree but sent an amendment? I don't know. It genuinely feels like Israel wanted to commit to the invasion no matter what, and Israel and America are both kind of waffling on what narrative they want to settle on to what extent Hamas is at fault for this. I've been checking multiple sources. The amended thing is accurate. Yeah, but how much warning did Israel have beforehand to the amendment? And even then, that doesn't justify the operation in Rafah. You know, like that's what they're committing to.
That pier finished, but that said, no one should think that the pier. I mean, you could see. No one should think that the completion of this pier and the opening of that route is in any way a replacement for Kerem Shalom and Rafah being open. Getting that pier finished is not sufficient means to close other gates. It's not sufficient reason to operate in the south and disrupt the delivery of humanitarian assistance, because even when that pier is open, the amount of aid it can deliver a day, somewhere around 100 trucks, in no way can replace what needs to come into Gaza through these other gates.
Yeah, I wonder if it was actually incredibly cucked to spend $350 million building a contrived pier like aid delivery system rather than just strong-arming Israel into keeping their existing like ports of aid open anyway. You know, we gotta tiptoe around Israel. Like we're treating Israel like a abusive dad. Like we're trying to tiptoe around the house at 11 p.m. You know, to not wake him or something. Like what the.
Very good. Someone that's been watching the Pentagon briefings. I wish I had time. No offense, I wish I had time to watch their briefings as well as do my own. I just don't. Janet, go ahead.
Thank you, Matt. Regarding the U.S. and South Korea's defense cost sharing.
To be fair, a port for cargo ships has way higher capacity than Iraq. Nope, Benjamin, you're wrong. He just said it can only take about 100 trucks worth of stuff a day because they take a cargo ship and they drop that all off at this little floating pier, and then they have a little like smaller boat take it and deliver it to the beach, you know, because they can't build a full actual like dock, you know, or pier or anything.
It has been reported that
port.
If former President Trump is re-elected, South Korea's defense cost sharing will increase significantly. Recently, there was a discussion on the defense cost sharing between South Korea and the United States in Hawaii. You know that. Will defense cost sharing be increased under the Biden administrations? If so, what percent will increase?
I just don't have those numbers at my fingertips. Sorry.
But you don't have anything for because you have.
I mean, in terms of the percentage, I just it's not.
But someone
I'm happy to take it back and try.
All right,
to
thank you. And have another one. And recently, UN resolution to prevent nuclear weapons in space were rejected by Russia's veto. What do you think about the UN's permanent members imposing penalties to veto abuse?
So, as we said at the time, we were incredibly disappointed that Russia vetoed what should have been a quite uncontroversial resolution regarding the obligations of state parties under the Outer Space Treaty. It should be clear, I think, that no country should have reservations about prohibiting putting a nuclear weapon into orbit. And in terms of potential actions, I don't have anything to preview from here. Go ahead.
Thanks, Matthew. Politico just reported that and I'm quoting from the report, administration is holding up shipments of 2 types of Boeing-made precision bombs to send a political message to Israel, end quote. Is this true?
I think Michelle asked me that exact question 5-10 minutes ago, and I answered it.
Okay, sorry. Now that Israel
snooty
has invaded Rafah, is the department considering any actions such as sanctions or withholding aid from Israel?
I also answered that question earlier when I said we are not going to preview policy options at this time.
And finally, 6 lawmakers from the Congressional Executive Commission on China has sent a letter to the State Department asking for state to use its existing rewards program to seek firsthand information on forced organ harvesting in communist China and disrupt the illicit trade. The State Department has expressed concerns about this issue before publicly and in the human rights reports. Do you have any response to the letter, and will state consider using the rewards program to stop forced organ harvesting?
We I'm sure, have received that letter and will respond in due course to the members themselves.
Sir,
Go ahead.
thank you, sir. 2 questions.
Thank you.
One, as far as conflict in the Middle East or Gaza or Hamas and Israel is concerned, first, on October 7, Hamas attacked the innocent people in Israel. Now, innocent people are being killed or they are dying in Gaza because of basics they are not getting. My question is that Hamas may be a common problem for the common people in Gaza, and how can you describe for the common people we are negotiating with Hamas? Is Hamas a terrorist organization or is it a political organization?
It is absolutely a terrorist organization.
So why are we negotiating?
The idea that something that is a terrorist organization is not a political organization, as vice versa, is one of the most insane, disingenuous post 9/11 brain rot delusional positions imaginable. You know, it's insane. Like, terrorism is literally violence against a civilian population for political purposes. How could you possibly believe? Like, is the Taliban not a political organization? They're literally the government of Afghanistan now. What about Al Qaeda? Are they apolitical? Al Qaeda? Like, insane, genuinely insane.
Negotiating then with them.
Well, we don't. Hamas is holding.
Yeah, the reason they do this distinction, by the way, is because of the age-old position: if we do it, it's good, and if they do it, it's bad. That's the reason why. Because America is funding terrorism right now, civilian violence or violence against civilian population for political purposes through Israel. And we don't want it to be thought of as like state-sponsored terrorism. So the political organization is the label given to a legitimate, you know, they're one of the big boys, they're on the table, you know, actors, and then terrorist org is just given to like the ones we don't even want to consider as political agents, the ones we don't want to legitimize by implying that they might have like something to say or something they believe.
Holding civilians hostage, including American citizens, and we want to see those American citizens return home. So it's also true that Hamas is one of the parties to this conflict and has the ability to end it. So we think it's appropriate. We're not in direct negotiations with Hamas, but obviously we're engaging with countries in the region, Qatar and Egypt, who have the ability to talk to them. And we think it's appropriate to do so because we want to see these hostages return home, especially the American hostages, but the hostages of Israel and every other country. Remember, they're not just Israeli citizens who are being held hostage, and we believe this is the best way to do so.
Second, sir, Secretary of State and Secretary of Treasury both were in China recently, and both want Chinese leadership about not to interfere in the U.S. elections and among others. Can you describe that? What kind of warning was, and what was the response from the Chinese leadership?
So I'm not going to speak to that in any level of detail, but the secretary did make clear, reiterating something that we have a message that we have delivered previously to the Chinese government, that any interference, any attempt to influence our upcoming election is something that would be unacceptable.
Thank you very much, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you. Just to clarify, you've called the Rafah operation limited, but you also said it had the appearance of being a prelude, your word, to a major.
Immediately, he's like, he doesn't want to talk about this anymore. Like clear contradictions in the points that he's making, but he's like, yeah.
I don't think that's what I said. It's not what I intended. I said that they have number one, they have described it as limited. It looks at this way to not be the major operation that you would see, say, for example, if they entered the neighborhoods where they have ordered evacuations. We don't know if it's a prelude or not.
Why would they order evacuations if they didn't plan to enter the areas they're is he genuinely proposing the idea that Israel is ordering an evacuation for fun? Like 100,000 people just move about, we're taking the crossing as well. Ha ha. Oh my God. It's like the dishonesty is so transparent that they don't even, what do you even say to this, they're laughing at you. It's no different than the shit Russia did, where they just belted out, obviously unbelievable justifications for their invasion of the Donbass, and they're laughing at you when they do it. They know it's ridiculous. They don't care. The whole point is just to promote disinformation. Now he's doing the exact same thing. He's doing it on a smaller scale, but this is so uncredible that it's not even, it's the same. They're laughing at you.
Clear that they intend to launch a major military operation, and we have made clear that we are opposed to that. I can't speak to.
So you're not calling it a prelude?
No, I can't speak to whether
because Yoav Gallant is. I'm sorry. Yoav Gallant is touring the Rafah area today, and he said, I directed the IDF to enter the Rafah area, take the crossing, carry out its missions. This operation will continue until we eliminate Hamas in the Rafah area.
Also, Netanyahu's war cabinet voted unanimously on doing it, and Netanyahu has said multiple times that he wants to do all this in Rafah with a major military operation. Over and over and over again, all they've said is, yeah, we're not going to stop until Hamas is eradicated, something they can't do without a major operation in Rafah. Well, they can't do it no matter what, but still.
And the entire Gaza Strip. So that doesn't sound limited to me.
So they have made similar statements in the past about what their policy intends to be.
What? Are you kidding me? Hey, how do you reconcile your statements with the fact that Israel obviously objectively wants to do a major operation and have been talking about it and voting on it? And he's like, yeah, they say lots of stuff, who knows? Well, those crazy kids. And he's smiling when he does it too. He knows that's the game. The reporters know that he can't say anything that actually condemns Israel. He knows they know it. So he's just like, you're asking me, you.
We have made our statements about
She's
what our
laughing.
policy
They're both
is,
laughing.
and we will continue to make that clear. Yeah.
I want to move to another region, Haiti. Do you have any updates for us on where we're at in terms of the deployment of that police force or security force now that the Presidential Council was put into place? What is the status of play on that at this point?
So we welcome the process, the progress in the political process that has taken place. We continue to work with our Kenyan partners and other countries for the deployment of the MSS. In terms of an exact deployment schedule, we have, I think for operational security reasons, not wanted to affix a public date to it, but it's something that we're working to make happen as soon as possible.
But are there any pre-elements forward people going in now in Haiti from the U.S. or from?
Not that I'm aware of.
I mean, it's more of a Pentagon question.
Yeah, that's why. That's kind of like why I'm. Yeah. Go ahead. Yeah.
So just back to Rafah. Prior to Israel taking control, Hamas was collecting revenue, as you said, of those goods. Can you go into more detail on how Hamas was benefiting from that crossing, and also how you navigate the fine line of ensuring that they're deprived while also keeping it open.
Well, Hamas has been the government in Gaza, so they were performing, in addition to being a terrorist organization, they were the de facto government in Gaza, and so we're performing government functions, and that includes running a border crossing where you can collect customs.
I thought they weren't a political organization. I thought they're a non-political governmental organization that is also okay. Mm-hmm.
You can also, if you control a border crossing, collect, let's call them more irregular payments, and we have seen both of those things happen. And so it is a legitimate goal to try to shut off and choke off that revenue stream to Hamas. That said, we want to see Rafah open, and so someone needs to be on the Gaza side of Rafah to run that side of the crossing. The Egyptians can't do it. We talked about this very early in the conflict when we were trying to open Rafah in the first place, so someone needs to be there to do it, and we continue to work through how to get that gate open and how to keep it open.
And there's a report, can you confirm that there's a plot to assassinate Zelensky and other top Ukrainian figures that failed?
So obviously the Ukrainian government has made an announcement to that effect. We have been in close contact with them about that. I would defer to the Ukrainian government to speak to the details of it, but obviously it just speaks to the depravity that we've seen on display from the Putin regime since. Then
immediately we talk about Ukraine, the narrative switches immediately. All of a sudden we're valiant defenders of liberalism. Now, like the attack on civilians engaged in by Russia are completely unjustified. Now, it's
the outset of this conflict.
Thank you.
Right.
Okay, so given that Israel is pledging to wage an operation in Rafah using U.S. weapons that the U.S. opposes, is there any internal process going on to figure out what went wrong internally? Like how did the process allow the weapons to be shipped and then into a situation in which Israel's going to use them in opposition to what the United States wants done?
I don't think I can answer that question without presupposing a policy decision that we have not yet announced. We have made clear that I've said it here, what our position is on a major military operation in Rafah, and Israel will make its policy decisions, and we will make ours.
That's great. Thanks. That's great. Thank you so much. We don't want them to do this thing, but they want to do this thing, but we're going to pretend they don't want to do this thing, and that them clearing out 100,000 civilians and taking the crossing isn't at all indicative of them continuing to do this thing. But yeah, they're going to do their thing. We're going to do ours, even though we've backed them and supported them and given them billions of weapons to protect them from the United Nations, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, just whatever. Just to each of us, I can't answer because I'm a little cuck birthday boy. Yeah, it's wild, man. It's crazy. Genuinely, I feel like I'm going to spend the rest of my career as a YouTuber, live streamer, whatever, having to explain over and over and over again that despite the fact that they're trying really hard to make it look this way, this is not, in fact, JQ, they control the government shit, but is actually just the military-industrial complex, policing institutions, conservatives, evangelicals, and other groups that hate life itself, all coordinating around Israel as a wedge issue to consolidate power and drive America further into authoritarianism. That it's just like another realpolitik edge that is developed in a kind of weird tangential way. Because like the military-industrial complex isn't exactly going to get much votes on the cause of we should spend more on weapons, but if you manage to frame it through this really narrow, like, well, actually all of this is about protecting Jewish people, therefore such and such, then you get a lot more mileage out of your propaganda. Like every stream I do on Israel now, there are people in chat going like, why are they doing this? And it's like, I've answered a million times, but I don't blame you for being curious because it really genuinely does seem like they're doing the meme, like the Biden administration is falling on the sword, damaging their own re-election options for no reason other than because we're cucked to Israel, right? And that's not what it is. It's just like, you genuinely have to be kind of locked in on political analysis to understand it more than that because it sure is taking that appearance,
So if they do continue this operation, will it result in a review of what went wrong?
Again, I'm just not going to speak to what policy determinations we might make or what internal kind of mechanisms would go into answering such a question.
Pakistan question real quick?
Sure, yeah.
Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer recently met with the Pakistan ambassador, and he relayed to the ambassador that Imran Khan's safety in prison was a high priority of the United States. Did he coordinate that conversation with the State Department? Does the State Department share that view that his safety in prison is a high priority of the U.S.?
So I'm not aware of any coordination. It may have happened, may have been conversations between this building and Senator Schumer and his staff, and I'm just not aware of them. It's certainly possible. But obviously, we want to see safety and security of every prisoner in Pakistan or anywhere else in the world, something that every person, every detainee, every prisoner is entitled to basic human rights and protection under the law.
Follow, please.
Go ahead.
Thank you. U.S. Ambassador in Pakistan.
And Donald Blum met with the current leadership of Imran Khan's party. And after that meeting, there were like dozens of stories circulating in Pakistani media. Could you tell us something about that, as that meeting was arranged on the request of U.S. Ambassador Donald Blum?
Dozens of stories circulating about a meeting
Different
with our
stories.
ambassador. What a new thing.
Different stories.
I haven't got a Donald Blum question in a while. Yes, the U.S. Ambassador Donald Blum met with the leader of the opposition in the National Assembly, Omar Ayub Khan, and other senior members of the opposition to discuss a broad range of issues important to the bilateral relationship. This includes U.S. support for continued economic reforms, human rights, and regional security.
Sir, after that meeting, the leadership of PTI, Imran Khan's party, told media that they have expressed their concerns about human rights violations, fabricated cases against Imran Khan, freedom of speech, and others. So what is your position on these issues, sir?
All right, are we done
So, diplomatic engagement is routine and something.
Like, where is this line for you in the United States where you're going to say, like, okay, this is now large-scale operation and we don't support that?
I'm not going to get into trying to define it here. I will add, though, that we have had detailed conversations with the Israeli government about this, much more detailed for obvious reasons than what we are willing to say.
Yeah, okay, yeah, we get it. Wow, we watched an entire State Department daily briefing and not a single vertebra found. Incredible.